Welcome to the deep dive on the Hoop City with Paul Sir weekly show, and I'm really pleased to welcome back into our discussion Ben Golliver from the Washington Post. Ben, you just got back from Sin City. Talk about the experience of the NBA Cup. I mean, there's lots to discuss, sort of lots to unpack around the Cup, its validity, etc. But talk about the product on the floor itself.
Well, it's a quirky event, right? I mean, it's kind of at a weird time in the NBA calendar. People are really thinking about, football down here in November and December. But if you look at the games were really good. The Knicks put on a show, beating the Orlando Magic in the semifinals. We got maybe the game of the year between the Spurs and the Thunder, a big upset, only Oklahoma City's second loss of the entire season, and Victor Wembanyama playing a great game in the other semifinal. And then the final was a really competitive game that I thought had a lot of layers to it. It kind of swung on offensive rebounding for Mitchell Robinson, the size and the length of Mitchell Robinson holding Wembanyama in check. And, honestly, it was a great scene afterwards, too. One of my favorite moments was Spike Lee, the famous director and huge Knicks fan. He actually got down low with his cell phone camera. He was having the directorial impulses kick in. He wanted to get just the right angle to capture the trophy celebration, where Adam Silver's given Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson the first trophy the Knicks have won in more than 50 years, right? So it's quirky. Nobody really knows how to celebrate. The guys were just kind of quietly drinking beers, not really popping champagne in the locker room. But certainly I thought it was, one of the better cups that we've had so far. There's only been three. And, it maybe made up for some so-so crowds in Vegas. It's not the craziest basketball plays. Like I said, it's a weird time of year, but we certainly got great basketball and a fun scene, even if the crowds weren't, electric.
They did a good job of masking it on the broadcast. You really didn't get the sense that it was as poorly, and I think that's a fair word, disappointingly attended as I think the NBA would have liked it to be. But you hit it right on the head, Ben, in terms of quality of play on the court. Very, very good. Very compelling. Now, a question I have regarding the San Antonio Spurs is, did they discover anything in their victory over the Thunder? Now, I feel a little prophetic. I'm going to toot my own horn here. Last weekend on our show, I made a special point of talking about the potential of this San Antonio Spur outfit without Wembanyama, the success they've had. But this is a very talented group, and it somewhat reminds me in many respects of OKC. So I kind of rambled a bit on you there, but let's go back to the original point. Did they unpack anything that other teams can learn from in terms of how they play the Thunder?
Well, I think all season long we've asked, well, who actually poses matchup problems for the Thunder, right? Because it feels like they dictate style, they dictate pace, they speed you up, they make you uncomfortable with their defense. And then they have the best closer in the NBA with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So you're looking around saying, this is pretty challenging to come up with, who's going to knock these guys off. Typically, we always come back to Joker and say, well, he's the biggest, best player in the league, so he's going to give you some problems. But I think we saw that Wembanyama can really give them some problems, too. The reason why I say that is the defensive impact. He just completely took away the paint. The Thunder did not want to challenge him when he was on the court. And so much about Oklahoma City's offense is drive and kick, or it's Shai getting to his spots inside the arc. And you kind of saw all that stuff dry up. They didn't get to the free throw line a ton, especially Shai. Jalen Williams had a really tough time finishing, and he likes to go to the basket a lot. And it puts all the pressure on Oklahoma City's three-point shooters. And if they have one weakness as a team, it's just the spotty three-point shooting from the complementary guys. In an ideal world, you want to force their other guys to beat you. You do not want the ball in Shai's hands. And what the Spurs showed is we can defend Shai without having to commit 2 and 3 defenders, because we could just take away his best spots, going towards the hoop. Now, I know the Thunder are going to be making adjustments. I mean, there's no question they're going to be able to kind of figure something like this out. But what it does do is kind of set up, I think, an interesting rivalry going forward, where the Spurs aren't quite ready yet, but they're definitely ahead of schedule. and they have a player who has the potential to be the best player on the court in a playoff series against Oklahoma City. And there are very, very few teams around the league that can say that.
That was my point last weekend, is they have the generational player and the generational nightmare of a matchup. Like, what do you do with 7'5" with the skill set that this young man possesses? Like, it really is ludicrous when you see him handling the ball, coming down the court and pulling up from 5 feet outside the 3-point line, and not knocking down one, knocking down 2 or 3 consecutively. Like, he really is a marvelous, marvelous talent. And let's just all hope he is healthy for the rest of the year. Now, the other day on PTI, pardon the interruption, Kornheiser and Wilbon were talking about, should the Spurs try to make a move to pick up Giannis? And Tony, no. Michael, yes. I would fall in the definite no camp, because the notion that you can win right now, that is alluring. But I mean, they have done exactly what OKC has done. They have drafted intelligently. They are building systematically. They've been extremely patient. With all their success in the past, they've had a rough go the last few years, but they've been patient, stuck with their plan, and now it's starting to bear fruit. What are your thoughts? Is a move like that, does it make any sense? Or should they try to get into the sweepstakes for Giannis? Or should they just stay the course?
Well, I used to be in the camp that said trade for Giannis going back to last summer, because I felt like it just would give them an inside-outside duo that nobody could really deal with. It's like the most modern version of, Tim Duncan and David Robinson, like this Twin Towers that would just wreak havoc on everybody. Since I've seen Castle play this season, he's really come along faster than I thought. And since I've seen Harper hit the ground running, those are all looking like great draft picks, and they're looking like they're going to have a long window. So I think the idea to make a win now move right now after you already traded for Fox, I'm not sure there's a ton of logic in that. If you're San Antonio, I just did a big study on injuries in the NBA. Obviously, they're up like crazy compared to sort of past eras, and people are attributing it to pace and space. And one of my conclusions, and this might sound a little wild, but if I was an NBA team, I don't know if there's a single player over 30 years old that I would trade for besides Joker, because the rate of injury is just incredibly high among star players. And the guys who get up into that 30-plus zone, they're on the big-time max contracts, right? They're making $50+ million a year. Here's a stat for you, Paul. 30 NBA players, the highest paid 30 NBA players this year, are on track to make $525 million specifically for games they don't play in due to injury. That's basically a third of the total salary you're paying those top 30 guys is just basically a write-off, because they're not even on the court, this season. We're seeing calf injuries, obviously the Achilles injuries. We're seeing a lot of wear and tear muscle stuff because of the pace and space, like I mentioned. And we're seeing Giannis repeatedly get injured here over the last 3 to 4 years. And so if you really want to build around a team right now, what's working is not the big 3-star model. What's working is lots of young legs, depth, and cost-controlled contracts, flexibility. So if you need to plug in different players, you're able to do that. And I think San Antonio would be sacrificing a lot of those things if they traded for Giannis. And so that's why I say they could take the slower road. And there may be other trades available that aren't quite as expensive as a Giannis trade would be. Because not only do you have to pay Giannis, which is a lot of money, right? He's going to want a new contract, but you also got to give up draft picks. You got to give up players to get him. And so I wouldn't do it if I was San Antonio.
I wouldn't either. And I'm talking with Ben Golliver here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. I totally agree with your assessment. It is staggering when you describe how much lost salary is being just put to the side because of the injury bug. Pace and space. All
guaranteed, by the way. It's guaranteed money.
Well, yeah,
so those
that's
guys
beauty.
They get paid one way or another. It's crazy.
That's the NBA. Guarantee everything. Pay as much as the agents want you to pay. But I heard an interesting assessment the other day, and I think it was Avery Johnson was talking about how the trade that Nico Harrison made with Luka Terrible trade. We all agree with that. That turned out beautifully for Dallas because they've got Cooper Flagg, who is steadily evolving and improving into the type of player that we believe he will be and will continue to become. But he was talking about how that trade screwed everything up for everybody because now every trade is possible and more trades will become impossible because organizations are going to be scared to death to make a mistake similar to what Dallas almost made, other than just strictly by the grace that they received for getting Cooper. I think there's something to that, and I think there's a lot to what you just described, which is the wear, tear, and the breaking down of players that in spite of all training, nutrition, all of that, it's the injury rate is so high. Getting that older player, mortgaging the house, that may be passé.
Well, here's the interesting part about the Luka trade. One of the main motivations for doing that, I think, besides the personality conflicts, was the fact that he was having repeated injuries, including calf strains, which is one of these things that players and teams really worry about because, for stars, can they handle the burden of having the ball as much as Luka has and still stay healthy over the course of a season? So you could say, well, the Mavericks were potentially afraid to pay Luka $70 million a year because of all these injury issues. So there is some logic, even though they handled it, completely in the wrong way, to wanting to trade him. But the huge flaw of the deal was they traded him for an older injury-prone player in Anthony Davis. And what happened as soon as Anthony Davis got to Dallas? He got injured. And what happened this year, and what's the real reason, why Nico Harrison got fired to start the season? Yes, everybody was upset about the Luka trade, but he also didn't have Anthony Davis and he didn't have Kyrie Irving on the court. Those guys were injured. It's $100 million worth of players on the sideline. You can't win basketball games with $100 million of players on the sideline, even if Cooper Flagg is looking like one of the best rookies we've seen in a while and delivering great value, right, at a cost-controlled contract as the number one pick. So the injury issue, to me, it just sort of hangs over everything. Trading Luka was a bad idea, but to me, trading for Anthony Davis was sort of like, the cherry on top of the really bad idea. And I think you want to avoid both those mistakes if you're other front offices, right? Like, you do not want to blindside your fan base by trading away an icon and getting yourself, the topic of every national television show because of what an idiot you are. Obviously, you don't want to do that. But you also need to be really careful in terms of the pieces that you're getting back so you don't put yourself kind of backdoored into a corner where now you're stuck and what's the plan? I mean, what does Dallas do from here? Taking over that job is a very difficult job. Do you have to trade Anthony Davis for pennies on the dollar? Do you have to hope that Kyrie Irving comes back healthy and he, even though he's in his mid-30s and a small guard, he can still give you something? Do you just try to do a complete teardown around Cooper and build it around him? I mean, what's the strategy? Very difficult spot to be in. And, the main reason why is because they didn't construct a good package for Luka. You could imagine an alternate world where they got very flexible expiring contracts and like 5 first-round picks for Luka. Well, we'd all be saying today, Dallas is in a much better spot if they had done that.
They certainly would. But let's take Giannis just a little bit further here. Giannis reminds me somewhat, not as extreme, but reminds me somewhat of Joel Embiid, the breaking down of a great player, and it's becoming more systematic and more consistent. What franchise, in your opinion, let me rephrase it, are there any franchises, in your opinion, where they should sell the house and try to get Giannis in to win now? Is there anybody out there that jumps out at you that this might make a bit of sense to roll the dice?
Well, you can always see Miami in this mix, right? Like, they're kind of in a placeholder situation here. They don't have the superstar level player. They're kind of punching above their weight class this year with this really interesting offense. It's just like go, 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 and attack, attack, attack. Personally, I think it's a little gimmicky if we're talking about very high-level basketball. Are you going to be able to make the finals with that offense? I don't think so, that style of play. And you're probably going to see some guys break down trying to play that style too because it's just so rigorous and demanding, right? But you could imagine Giannis there as the new figurehead, kind of the Jimmy Butler role from the past in terms of being the guy everything revolves around. Here's the tricky part with Giannis, though. we have to look back at his partnership with Damian Lillard and say those guys did not make each other better. And in fact, they might have made each other worse. So if you're a team like the New York Knicks, you just win the NBA Cup, you're all excited. Karl Anthony Towns is on FaceTime with all their celebrity fans. Like I said, Spike Lee is crouching down, getting his perfect shot of the trophy celebration. You have to ask, can Giannis play with Jalen Brunson any better than he played with Damian Lillard? And people start to do the mental exercise and they say, oh, they'd be great pick and roll partners. And Karl Towns would spread the court. Well, Giannis doesn't want to roll. Giannis wants the ball in his hands. Giannis wants to be the ball handler. He wants you to set a pick for him or just get out of the way, right? So I think that his, I would say, limitations or his need to be ball dominant, the number one guy, and have everything work around him, and the fact that he can't shoot, so you have to have perfect spacing around him, it limits the number of teams that are really going to be interested. Like, for example, I hear a lot of times people say, well, set up the European connection with the Lakers. It could be Luka and Giannis. I mean, Giannis does not want to watch Luka pound that basketball. I can tell you that. It's not going to be a fit. So I do think it's a short list for Giannis, and I think that's probably why there hasn't even been more hype around these trade talks. I was surprised. It really wasn't that big of a topic of conversation in Las Vegas. It came up, but it wasn't like this 6-alarm fire where it's the only thing on people's minds. Instead, it was, a lot of people wondering, well, how many teams are there that really make a lot of sense for him?
What a great swinging of the pendulum, because when you think back to James, let's just use James Harden, for instance. And you think, and when I think about James Harden, I think about how ludicrous this is. The guy goes from team to team and he says, well, I want to be traded. And then it's like everybody's fawning all over the guy trying to get him in. And then you get James Harden and you still can't win. Not that he's not a great player. He's a Hall of Fame player, all that stuff. But the guy doesn't get it done for the teams. Now you got a guy like Giannis. He's won a title, but the pendulum has swung. And people now are very measured. And now you're looking at Oklahoma City and you're going, one or two strategic trades. You get a good player, guy, of course, that exceeded everybody's expectations in SGA. But you look at it and you go, that's the way we've got it. That's the way we got to go about it. Like in Philadelphia, they talked about trusting the process. Well, the process was flawed.
Yeah.
It didn't work. It wasn't the right guy for the process. It sounded like the right thing. They didn't trust the process and ended up with the mess, although now they're coming out of it as well. If Embiid can be serviceable with Maxi's emergence and some of the other great young talent that they've got, they can be pretty good. But boy, the pendulum has really swung in terms of trade. Like you said, you would think everybody would be ringing the Giannis bell right now and going crazy over who could possibly get this unbelievable generational talent. But that just doesn't seem to be the case.
It's a great lesson in how quickly windows can close. And we'll remember there's been years worth of Giannis rumors, right? And there was a couple of years where he probably should have forced his way out if he really was trying to maximize his title odds. Now, the Bucks fans are going to get mad and say, well, we love Giannis. Giannis loves us. Why should he force his way out? Well, we're strictly talking about this from what's the best chance he has to win a championship, right? And I actually go back, LeBron gets a lot of grief for the player empowerment era. And, it's probably not my preferred way that the NBA is where, stars are changing teams all the time. And certainly he was a major figure in sort of that copycat initiative where Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Chris Paul are on a new team every single year, right? But one thing he didn't let happen is windows close with, he was always proactive. When he made the decision in 2020, it caught people by surprise because it felt early. He's like, oh, he's going to Miami. Wait a minute. He's supposed to stick this out in Cleveland. When he went back to Cleveland, it caught people off guard, including Pat Riley. He's like, we just got here. This is only year 4. We got a lot of time to run. What's happening? But he could see the writing on the wall. He could understand when some of these little windows were closing. You look at Giannis, the window closed once the Damian Lillard thing didn't work out, right? And then, you have no chance to win a championship. Now they're well below 500. He's stuck. He's injured again. It's a complete mess, right? They had to change coaches multiple times. There's all these red flags, and he didn't listen to any of them. The other team that's dealing with this right now, by the way, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. It really feels like their window was last year.
Yes.
Everything broke right. Stars were aligned, 60-plus wins. This is finally the chance for them to break through. And instead they come back this year, more injury issues. The pieces don't fit perfectly together. They don't have the same zest for life. They lose a couple of pieces here and there, try to make, different moves to patch up the holes. And it just doesn't work. So I think, as we're starting to criticize NBA players for changing teams every year and trying to get out ahead of stuff, we have to understand why they do it, because there is that possibility where if you wait, if you let a window close, you're just stuck and it doesn't matter anymore. Kevin Durant in Phoenix, another great example of, the window closed and he just had to get out, right? So, you can kind of understand why these guys get so jumpy, even though I do think you're right. The patient approach, the draft and build approach is really what's winning right now, as Oklahoma City has shown us.
And it's winning right now. And I think that's the key phrase in there. It's winning right now until the next trend happens. And then everybody's going to do that because that's the way the NBA goes. But I think there are a couple of thoughts regarding Giannis. Is that the last time we'll see him in a Bucks uniform? I was thinking about it last night. I was watching the Raptors play the Bucks, and the Bucks, I mean, they play hard. They're just
they're not good.
They're just not great. They're not any good relative to being like a serious threat in the NBA. But I was thinking, is that the last time we're going to see Giannis in a Bucks uniform? Then I started thinking, maybe not. I don't know that he's torched the bridge. He's poured the kerosene on it, but I don't think he's thrown the torch on it just quite yet. That maybe if the suitors aren't there, we're going to see Giannis back on the court for the Bucks this year.
Well, the other way you can read some of this talk about, there's these rumors that he's had these trade talks. You could also read that as his representation kind of applying pressure to the Bucks and saying, hey, just go out there and get him a little bit more talent. Instead of selling Giannis, go be a buyer again and try to find somebody who can help him out and, give them something to try to play for down the stretch. And, if you're Milwaukee, that's a challenging spot to be in because, they waived and stretched Lillard last year for more than $100 million. So every year for the next 5 years, they have to pay Lillard $20 million on their salary cap sheet, and they get no production from it. $20 million buys you two good players, and it's just a write-off every single year. So they're kind of backed into a corner. And so you have to wonder, is it really in their best interest to try to continue to build this thing around Giannis, or should they try to retool? It's challenging. I do think that when Giannis gets traded, I suspect, or if he gets traded, whenever he gets moved, I suspect the price is going to be less than people would have imagined, because I still think that some people price in Giannis as being closer to that finals MVP 50-point game and the closeout win version of himself. And he's years removed from that. He's past his 30th birthday. A lot of the advanced stats guys are saying, well, you're already seeing, modest signs of decline. Now, of course, he's going to put up his 30 and 10 every night. Like he's going to be productive, but is he still the same defensive player of the year candidate caliber player that he was earlier in his career? I would say no. I don't think it's a horrible regression, but he's not quite that same impact-making player, and he just hasn't learned how to shoot. So if he's your best player in late game situations, you can't count on him to do what Shea does every night and generate a shot off the dribble that's going to be a good shot. You have to have somebody else, a Chris Middleton type, to handle those responsibilities. And so, again, these flaws are of bigger concern to teams that are like championship or bust, right? Hard to build a title team around this version of Giannis. But if you're the Miami Heat, you want to be relevant, you want to be in the mix, maybe make an Eastern Conference Finals if things break right, maybe make a Finals if things break really well, like they did with Jimmy Butler twice. Somebody like Giannis could be appealing. But again, if that's your goal, I don't think you're selling the farm, 10 draft picks, 3 young players to get him for that. And so that's why I kind of feel like the right time for a divorce here, actually for both sides, the best interest of both sides was to do this a couple years ago.
Probably very true. And like you said, that window has closed. The Miami scenario is intriguing from the standpoint of Miami has the pockets to do this, where a small market team like Milwaukee really doesn't have the ability to absorb that Lillard thing and continue to try to bring in talent, exceptional talent around Giannis to get things back on track from a potential title run standpoint. So Miami does intrigue me.
By the way, let me just say real quick, one guy who didn't see the Bucks window close without being proactive was one of their co-owners. He actually sold out a year or two ago, sold his share. So he sold at the peak moment. I think he saw the writing on the wall. He knew where this was going, and he said, "Hey, I bought for low, I'm selling for high, and I'm getting out." So, it's interesting sometimes how the business of basketball can kind of reveal what should be happening on the court. And I remember when that happened, thinking, "Huh, what does this guy know that we don't know?" And
Well, we know now.
we know now, no question about it.
I'm talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Ben, I want to talk about a couple of specific games. Number one, I'll go to Denver first. The other night, Denver played Houston. Fun game to watch. Overtime, 128-125 win for Denver. You see Kevin Durant still being productive at his age. He's not the player he once was. All the metrics show a slight decline, year over year decline, but still, he's still beautiful to watch. That shot, the length, everything about him on the offensive side of the ball is beautiful to watch. Sengun, great game, 30-10-10, wonderful game, only to be completely overshadowed and blocked, the sun blocked out by Mount Nicola, because 39, I think what was it, 39, 15, and 11. And it wasn't, I wrote a blog the other day about it. And it's like watching Jokic play is like watching a great artist create a painting. And whether it's abstract realism or impressionism, he's got all these different shades and subtleties and nuances to his game in how he beats you. It's really remarkable to watch. And that game in particular, what I really gained an appreciation was his skills combined with his ability to impose his will on the game, all while doing it horizontally, is really quite amazing to watch.
Well, that's why I always say he's the one exception to that rule about would I trade for anybody who's over 30? Well,
right.
I mean, the horizontal part is so key. That's why he stays on the court. That's why they win so consistently. He rarely ever misses time due to injury. It's his superpower, is being so effective without really needing to sprint and jump, a ton and put a lot of pressure on those legs. I mean, he wins so many games with his mind. I always feel bad for Sengun because he does wind up in this could he be the next Joker conversation? That's unfair to both players. There is one Joker. There's nobody in NBA history before Joker is all that similar to Joker. I mean, people would say Arvydas Sabonis, but he was not doing the kind of stuff Joker's doing in the NBA right now. And then, nobody after Joker is going to be the same as this guy either. I mean, he is completely one of one. And so I feel bad for Sengun when he gets those kinds of comparisons. But, at the same time, it's a credit to him because he's incredibly productive, creative. He's got great footwork. He can score in a bunch of different ways. And I really think the last chapter for Sengun to really develop into what I would consider like a star level player, superstar level player, is kind of getting better at closing out games, whether it's shot selection, whether it's involvement of his teammates. Exactly. It's just the mastery aspect for him. He's just not the chess master yet. I think sometimes he gets a little panicky. Sometimes he feels like he's got to get a shot up quickly. It doesn't always feel to me like Houston knows exactly what they want to do in close games down the stretch. And, Ime Udoka's got a reputation as being a great defensive coach. And so, maybe there's a little, something that he could work on to help his guys out a little bit. Perhaps it's just the lack of shooting from some of their key spots that makes things more difficult. But, even going back to the European tournament this summer, Sengun down the stretch of the gold medal game wasn't great. And I just worry for Houston. They go out in the playoffs last year. It's some close games late, very winnable games that they're just not able to win. They lose game 7 at home. And Sengun, I thought, really was kind of put into a box by Golden State's defense. He just didn't have, free-flowing stuff. So that's the next step for him. If he wants to be as good as Rockets fans have really been hyping up here these last couple of years, it's learning how to close those games out, being the main guy. And Kevin Durant could be a weapon, but I also worry he could be a crutch for Houston because he will want the ball, right? He is going to be a guy where if a playoff series is on the line, KD is not going to be afraid to shoot it. He's going to shoot it efficiently. But ultimately, I think the best version of Houston Rockets are Sengun's team, not Durant's team. And so, still working through that dynamic, making sure he's the centerpiece late game. I think that's something that you want to see from Houston as they go forward this season. And I'm pretty excited because they're coming to LA for Christmas to play the Lakers. So that's a very winnable game for Houston. I hope we get a show.
You should. And I agree with your assessment of Şengün. Like the other night, I thought one of the critical plays was a sloppy defensive foul he took down the stretch that put Denver on the line at a critical time. And it was just a pointless middle of possession foul away from the ball, basically.
It happens all the time with him, right? It's the discipline. Yeah, in that European tournament, too, he was in foul trouble in the gold medal game. He didn't even start the second half because he got so many fouls. So it's an issue.
It really is. And I'm going to use your description of KD needing the ball in transition over to the game last night between the Lakers and the Jazz. Jazz didn't have Markkanen. Lakers, of course, Reeves and Ayton are both out. But there were some interesting things I thought in the game. Like, number one, a lot of conversation about Los Angeles's defensive deficiencies. Boy, was that on full display last night, giving up 79 again to Utah. I think Utah has 2 79-point first halves against the Lakers. They can't guard anybody at a high level. They just can't. That's number one. Number two, Luka's mastery, just delightful to watch. That horizontal style of play, playing downhill, controlling the defender, all those great things that he does. But where I'm going with my reference to KD, it's to LeBron. LeBron started out first couple of games when Reeves was healthy, kind of deferring, but now out of both necessity, but I also out of the fact that he can still do it. But is the best version of the Lakers as they get into the season, presuming that Austin is healthy? I think the best version of the Lakers is Luka, Austin, LeBron, and LeBron is a complementary player, just like you were referring to with Houston. Would you agree with that assessment, Ben?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, one issue the Lakers offense has had is that it's been very ISO heavy because Luka and Austin are so good as one-on-one players. But
yes,
as you get into like the big games, the premier opponents, the playoffs, you have to have more ball movement. You have to have more point of attack. You have to keep Aiden involved. You have to make sure you've got 5 threats on the court at all times. Even if they're not all big-time scorers, you want to have more of a team dynamic as opposed to a 1-on-5 approach, right? That's really what LeBron has helped with, right? It's the connecting, the distributing. When he's in that number 3 role, he can step up as an outside shooter. He can step up as a guy who can cut if necessary, to kind of, find some stuff. But really what he's bringing to the table that nobody else does is that secondary passing, whereas like you're keeping the bigs involved. You're finding the open shooter on the weak side. You're surprising the defense. You're attacking the weak side of the defense. LeBron is, overqualified to do those kinds of things. The best third option in NBA history, if you want to call him that, right?
Absolutely.
But it's been a successful role for him. I think the challenge, though, is the defensive end. The offense, it's been very, very good. It's not like the best in the league, but, it's consistently top 5, top 10. But if your defense isn't better than somewhere in the 20s, which is what it's been this season, you're dead on arrival going to the playoffs. You'll be lucky to win a first-round series, and you'll probably lose a first-round series. And the last time I checked, every team below the Lakers in the defensive rankings, all were losing teams below 500, right? And so that kind of tells you everything you need to know. You can't be the worst defense in the playoffs and expect to go anywhere. And so I feel like it's going to have to be personnel changes to get that improvement. I don't think it's a matter of they need time to gel. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's strictly they don't have enough good on-ball perimeter defenders especially when they're relying so heavily on Reeves and Doncic for big minutes. Like they have to have more help there. And so I don't know if they can do it without, potentially reallocating the money that's going to LeBron, right? I mean, if you're going to keep him all season and not trade him, and that seems like the way it's trending, he has the no trade clause. He's making $50-something million and not addressing this gigantic hole, right? If you fast forward to this summer and you have a decision, if you're the Lakers, do we pay LeBron big money again, or do we invest that $50 million in 3 defensive pieces, sort of like the Mavericks were trying to build around Luka, going to get a Daniel Gafford and a PJ Washington? Well, you plug those guys on the Lakers, they're better. It's just they're a better, more stable two-way team, right? So I think it's setting up a real showdown. At some point here is how much is LeBron really worth to the Lakers versus how much money do they need to set aside to make sure they can cover up some of their flaws. And by the way, Reeves needs a big new raise as well heading into next season. So some of that money is going to have to go to Austin Reeves, who clearly represents part of their future. He's a very popular fan favorite here in Los Angeles. So I guess long story short, I don't think the Lakers can cover every base with their current big three. It's just they can't play good enough defense with those three guys all making big money. So they're going to have to kind of figure out who's the odd man out.
I totally agree. I think that's a wonderful assessment. Odd man out. And what I'm curious about is we've touched on this in past conversations about how franchises tend to make the same mistake over and over again. Portland drafting big men with bad feet, that sort of thing. LeBron, I mean, you've got the prime example of holding on for dear life with Kobe for far too long in terms of crippling the franchise's future by mortgaging the house to pay Kobe what he, I guess, in one sense deserves. That to me is an interesting part of the NBA and pro sports in general. Is your longevity leads to a lucrative your most lucrative contract when your play is starting to decline the fastest. It's a real interesting contradiction in business thought.
Well, the NBA is the land of the golden parachute, is what you're saying.
Yeah, land of the golden parachute, like depreciating assets that you're valuing far higher than what they're actually able to produce on the court in this particular case. It is interesting about the Lakers, just watching them. They really are Luka's a marvel on offense. Reeves is just having a phenomenal breakout season, but my God, on defense, they are atrocious, really, really god awful. And their support players are just bad. They're just bad. I mean, Rui's having a nice season. He's a nice little piece, but man, when you go into the bench, that's a brutal group. Utah is interesting. You can see what the Angels are doing there, and it appears like they are going the OKC route in trying to build up. They've got some nice pieces there. They really do.
My favorite story coming out of Utah is the Keontae George situation. If you look at some of the advanced numbers for his first year, I think he was pretty much the worst player in the league, or one of the bottom five, worst players by something like win shares, which tries to capture your impact and everything you're doing on the court. It was the classic young guard, super inefficient, can't defend anybody, doesn't know how to run an offense, just kind of overwhelmed. I mean, we've seen even all-star guys like Darius Garland have a similar acclamation to the NBA, right? And the way the story is told, Will Hardy kind of sat Keontae George down last year, took away his minutes at times and said, basically, if you don't play defense or if you don't do the things you're supposed to be doing, you don't get to start, and it was one of those kind of tough coaching moments. It sounds like they had kind of a hard conversation last summer as well. I'm just reading the reports on this, but, essentially, again, saying, hey, if you want to be our guy, these are the things we need you to do. And he has come back much better. And maybe it's because if you played the Lakers every night, you're always going to look good, if you're a small guard. But I mean, he's had some real big scoring explosions against the Lakers this year, and he's definitely taken a big jump in his career. And so it finally looks like one of their draft picks may be hit. They've had a tough time in terms of the lottery luck in the recent years, where it always feels like they're drafting one or two spots below where the true talent is. And so, you're starting to collect this potpourri, chilly version of the team, but it doesn't really fit together. And you don't have that singular player. Obviously, their best guy is Lauri Markkanen, but I think most people would agree. I mean, he's probably the third best player on a championship team, not the best player, certainly not the second best player, right? So tough spot for them to be in. That's why coming into the season, everybody thought that they would probably be one of the big tankers, try to go out there and get AJ DeBanza from BYU, the Utah connection. And instead, they're really outperforming expectations, I think, because some of these guys are coming together. So, to me, I just like hearing that story about George, because it tells you there's still people out there trying to coach these guys, right? There's still an idea in the NBA that there can be accountability, that there can be standards, and it's not just we're going to roll the ball out and anything goes. And, hey, if you can score 25, don't worry about anything else. I mean, that's not the right message to win, right? And so I do think Will Hardy, he's kind of like a thorn in the side of the front office, where, they wanted the high draft picks, and he says, you know what, I'm going to outperform that. I'm going to keep giving you a team where every time there's a trade deadline, you have to trade away half the team so that we could be bad enough to get the pick that you want. Because it feels like he just continually is just boosting them up a little bit higher than they expect.
You're listening to The Deep Dive with Paul Sir. My guest is Ben Golliver of the Washington Post. We're talking all things NBA. So let's wrap things up. I've got two final questions for you, Ben. Biggest story not named Cooper Flagg from this last year in the NBA.
Oh, I thought you meant from this draft class, and I was thinking, you want to talk Con Knipple maybe, or Dylan Harper?
We can definitely do that because the draft class has been really something special. Harper and Knipple have been incredible.
I mean, to me, the biggest story, and maybe this ties in a little bit with the NBA Cup, it would be the gambling scandals, right? I mean, it's still kind of unresolved. I saw Chauncey Billups sold his house recently as he's kind of preparing for a lengthy legal drama. The Blazers replaced him on an interim basis with Thiago Splitter, but he's not the full-time coach. They haven't officially fired Chauncey Billups. Terry Rozier is hanging in Miami as maybe a trade chip, maybe not. The Heat are letting everybody know we had no idea about this scandal before we acquired him. We should get our draft pick back because, we wouldn't have done this trade if we knew it was going to be, such a circus. And, you look at the NBA, they're talking about moving the NBA Cup out of Vegas. Well, a good reason to move it out of Vegas is because, maybe a little distance from the city where some of Chauncey Billups' poker games were going on and just the entire implication of gambling. And then even bigger than that would be this idea of expansion. Adam Silver came out this week and said, well, next year we are going to have a firm decision on, are we going to expand, whether it's Seattle, Las Vegas, or who knows. I mean, obviously those are the leading cities. And if you're the NBA again, does expanding to Las Vegas in the middle of a giant gambling scandal where the FBI is involved and a sitting head coach and a player who was a starter for many years and Terry Rozier are all wrapped up in it, it just feels like it's kind of hanging over the league and hanging over the league's integrity. So, I think we're just sort of waiting for that maybe to run its course, to see what kind of legal hot water these guys are in and to see, how the NBA adjusts or doesn't adjust as it goes forward. It feels to me like their wholesale embrace of gambling in general has kind of stayed the same. It hasn't been, major new initiatives. They haven't dropped any partners. Maybe the distance from Vegas is the one thing that we could see. But, to me, I do feel like that is one of the biggest deals because every night you see some calls like, I don't know if you saw the Blazers Kings game last night where Denny is racing up the court and he quote unquote gets fouled by Russell Westbrook. And you watch the replay. It doesn't seem like there's any contact between those two players. He shoots 2 free throws and that's the game. They win, right? And it used to be, the refs suck. We don't like the refs. Now, when you look at comments on a play like that, it's the NBA is rigged. The NBA is rigged. They want, Vegas, they want this outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very hard to get your reputation back. It's very hard to reclaim credibility, when you have an open scandal, right? And when you really haven't made any major initiatives to address the issue. And so, to me, I think that's other than the injury issue that we talked about earlier, that's what concerns me the most. I want people to believe and I want the league to be 100% on the up and up, where you feel like every night you're getting a fairly refereed game, where you feel like wins and losses are the most important thing, not dollars and cents. And, I think unfortunately for the NBA, they've been wrapped up in this thing all season.
Well, they have. And when you sell your soul, which they have to gambling, you reap what you sow. And
you make your bed, huh?
You really have. You really have. And it's hard to now try to put the halo back in place because the horns are there. And now you've got this huge scandal that's looming. And like you said, there's just so many calls and so many games you go, this is not worthy of this league to have officiating like that, determining oftentimes outcomes of games, actual outcomes of games. And man, oh man, we've come way too far to have that be such an important part of the game. One of the annoying things about watching an NBA game is the commercials, all gambling, those god-awful gambling commercials that are just the worst in the world. And you're just bombarded with that. And I think, Mike, what's that doing to kids And then that can link into a whole just rabbit hole of NIL money trickling down into colleges, into high schools, and how that's just changing the whole psychology of the game. But let's look ahead, 2026. What do you think the biggest story is going to be when this NBA season wraps up? Is it going to be a Thunder repeat, or is it going to be something else?
Well, I think that there's a chance we're going to get history from the Thunder. I think that there's a really good chance they win 70, and I think they got a shot at winning 74. And I think that, if you flash back a decade when Golden State was going on their run, what you saw was that momentum really built after the All-Star break. Now, they came out of the gate just like the Thunder. I mean, it was like 24-0 for Golden State. So They announced their arrival. They set the tone. It was clear, like, these guys mean business. And they were such a star-studded team that they carried the entire league from a narrative standpoint that whole season, right up to the end when they blew it. And the 3-1 lead goes down in history as one of the craziest finals of all time, right?
Absolutely.
But I think with the Thunder, they have the discipline and they have the night-to-night consistency. They have the depth. They just have every base covered. Their defense is so good that I think if they continue on this current pace after the All-Star break, they're not as star-studded as those Warriors teams were. They don't have a Jordan. They got Shea. I love Shea. You love Shea. I know everybody up in your neck of the wood loves Shea, but he's not that. He's not that resident Jordan Curry figure, right? Now, their numbers are pretty similar. Statistics are pretty similar. They're winning games just like those guys won games, but just the fame factor maybe isn't there. But I think once you really start to, if they're on like a count where it's like, hey, they're on pace for 75, they're on pace for 76, they haven't lost in a month, they just ripped off another 12-game winning streak, like that kind of thing, there's a chance that Oklahoma City is going to get quite a bit more attention this year than even they did last year when they were the best team in the league as well. Because I think that there's just kind of this rallying effect when history is at stake where, I remember in 2016, I never thought Jordan's 72-10 record would go down. I made a point to go to the last game up in the Bay Area because I wanted to see it to believe it. I wanted to actually believe they could get 73.
Were there.
I was there. Well, it's a funny story, Paul, because I had the choice that night. Do I go see Golden State win 73 or do I watch Kobe's last game? And I made what most people would say was the wrong choice because, Kobe went out gunning and, I wound up seeing them a very routine victory over the Memphis Grizzlies, which wound up not being as historic as it could be once they lost the finals. And, it's no longer the greatest season ever, right? If you don't have the championship. So anyway, I think Oklahoma City not only has a chance to win 70, like I said, third team ever, chance to get 74, which would be most wins ever, chance for the highest point differential of all time, especially down the stretch of this season when teams are tanking and getting ready for the draft. And there's going to be a lot of wins available to them. And then they have a chance to go back-to-back, which we haven't seen since the Warriors in 2017 to 2018. That makes them the story to me. I think that puts them right on center stage, and I think that could get a lot of people interested here to see how does this team in the middle of nowhere, quote unquote, with all these young guys, how do they just do it at this pace, in a pace that we've never seen before?
Well, and I agree with you, particularly about the fact that they are in the middle of nowhere, because they really are. I mean, Oklahoma City, that is an island in the middle of the prairies, and to have the kind of franchise that they have, the kind of organization that they have to accomplish what they are, the way I think they've reshaped the way the NBA sees itself. I think all of those impacts are really something special. So I agree. I think that's going to be an intriguing part of the season. My final thought would be, can San Antonio or Denver do the thing when they match up? And you see signs and you go, if you can figure a little more out about Shea's game, and that's where it comes in. It's kind of like what you were describing with Miami. It's a gimmick. Shea's game is not gimmicky, but people are going to be scratching their heads, configuring things, trying to figure out how can we make someone else beat us. Like you said, if they have an Achilles heel, it is inconsistent 3-point shooting from their spot up, third through eighth man on the rotation, that might not be able to consistently knock it down. And Indiana took them to 7 games. That still amazes me, to think that this poor, woeful Indiana Pacer game last year took OKC to 7 games. It can happen. So it's going to be really intriguing.
You'll love a quote from Las Vegas. Steph Castle said, "Hey, beating Oklahoma City shows that we're serious because people were saying they were unbeatable." And that unbeatable word is one of those that should always raise sports fans' ears, right? It should always get you paying attention a little bit closer because
Yes,
rarely is a team unbeatable. An undefeated season in football is pretty rare. College football is very rare. Never happened in basketball, right? I mean, everybody's beatable on a given night. And Indiana took them to 7. Denver took them to 7. Maybe a little bit better health luck, a little bit worse shooting luck for Oklahoma City. Those series could have gone the other way. And they're also going to be having pretty heavy legs because they made a deep run last year when a lot of other teams, San Antonio was on vacation. Wemby was in China with the monks, right? So those kinds of things tend to catch up to people when they get to the playoffs, right? So I think it's going to be a fascinating postseason run. I wouldn't be surprised at all if I'm spending a decent amount of time back there in Oklahoma City. I really enjoyed my time last year there. And I got to say, it's arguably the best coach team I've ever seen in the NBA in terms of their night-to-night preparedness, effort level. I mean, that's the hardest part in the NBA is to get guys to play hard, because everybody's got the guaranteed contracts and there's always another game. So, you don't play well tonight, you can always make up for it tomorrow. Those kinds of human nature things, Oklahoma City has just conquered. Every night they play hard, and it's been a sight to behold. So I look forward to that certainly in 2026 and beyond.
I love when certain teams pull the rest of the league up to a new level by setting an example that everybody else knows now. There's a benchmark, and the water table is actually higher than where we thought it was before.
Yeah,
and they certainly have done that.
Well, they've scared some people too. Send them back to the tank race. There's some teams who are saying, "Hey, that water's too deep for us. That's
right.
We gotta go find some younger talent, and maybe we'll try again in a couple of years." Right? It's funny how that works out. Golden State had the same thing, by the way. There was a lot of teams back in the mid 2010s who said, "Hey, we don't have a shot here." Cleveland said, "Oh yeah, we're going to be able to do it. Let's load up and let's go toe to toe with them." San Antonio, same deal. And then there were some other teams that said, "Hey, check back with us in a couple of years. We're going to go get some lottery picks.
We're going to jump in the pool right away."
Yeah,
that's for sure. Well, Merry Christmas, Ben. Thank you so much for this, and I look forward to talking with you early in the new year. I hope you have a great time with your family. Thanks for all the time, all the insights. It's a great pleasure. It truly is.
It's my pleasure. Happy holidays to you and yours, and hope you get some Cancun time or something here to break up this winter, maybe, huh?
Well, we need that. We need that. But you know what? I was out playing tennis this morning. You can't beat it. It's 30 below. I'm walking into the tennis court, and I'm going, "This is great." I'm still hitting the ball.
Lungs of steel. Lungs of steel.
That's right. Take care, Ben.
All right, take care.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, joining me on the Hoop City with Paul Sir here on Sports 1440.